The wind cut through the frozen plains of Valdros like a knife, carrying a sting that burned through fur-lined hoods and scraped bare skin. Snow swirled in chaotic currents, hiding jagged ice ridges and the remnants of what had once been a thriving research station. Most humans would have turned back, abandoning these ruins to silence and frost. But not Aaron Callis. Aaron trudged forward, each step deliberate, boots crunching against the hardened snow. He wrapped his scarf tighter and glanced at the distant shadows beneath the ice cliffs. Two shapes lay chained, enormous even in the dim light, their scales dulled by frost, eyes half closed. Dragons. Living, breathing dragons. Their bodies were beaten, weakened, abandoned by humanity itself. He knelt near the first creature, feeling the tremor of its shallow breaths through the snow. His heart thudded, not in fear but in recognition of responsibility. Most people would have left them, written off as monsters or failed experiments. Aaron had no intention of doing the same. He had seen too much death, too much cruelty, and too much fear controlling human decisions. He could not allow the world to forget the dragons entirely. The chains were more than metal. They were layered with experimental energy locks, pulsing faint blue humming against the dragon's bioelectric fields. A single misstep and the dragons could die from the overload. Or worse, the chains could fry him too. Aaron crouched, examining the mechanisms with careful eyes. Years of engineering had taught him to see patterns in chaos. The locks were sophisticated but not unbreakable. Not if he could combine human cunning with courage. The larger dragon stirred, golden eyes flicking open. For a moment, fear and pain shone in those ancient eyes, but so did a glimmer of awareness, of hope. Aaron froze. He whispered softly, careful not to startle it, "I'm not here to hurt you." The dragon's nostrils flared, steam clouding the icy air. It tilted its head, curiosity mixing with wariness. A human had never come this close before, and most dragons assumed all humans brought chains and torment. Aaron's hands shook slightly as he worked. He had salvaged an energy manipulator from the ruins, an old piece of tech meant to handle unstable machinery. Now it was his lifeline. With careful taps and precise adjustments, he began rerouting the flow from one lock to another, watching the readings spike and dip in response. Each successful reroute brought a flash of hope. Each miscalculation could be fatal. Snow began to fall heavier, gusts ripping across the plains with a voice that threatened to drown out thought. Aaron adjusted his hood and kept moving, urgency rising with every second. His mind raced through calculations, predicting how the dragon's own bioelectric pulses might interact with the locks if rerouted. The risk was staggering, but standing idle was not an option. The smaller dragon groaned, trying to shift its massive body. The chains bit deep, sparks of pain dancing across its scales. Aaron felt a pang of guilt and determination. He had been born in a world that feared what it could not control, where courage often bowed to obedience. Not him. Not this time. He had made a choice, to face impossible odds and defy expectations, to act when everyone else hesitated. A shadow passed across the ridge. Aaron's peripheral sensors picked up movement. Drones? Patrol drones, sleek and lethal, programmed to neutralize any threats to the dragons. He froze for an instant, calculating. There were too many for a direct confrontation. Running was impossible, the ice cliffs offered no cover, and the dragon's weakened state prevented flight. Aaron clenched his jaw. His choices were few but not zero. He activated a minor electromagnetic pulse, small enough to disable the drones temporarily without risking the dragons. Sparks leapt from the nearest drone as it collapsed into the snow, engines sizzling. Aaron's pulse hammered in his chest as adrenaline surged. The dragons shifted again, responding instinctively to the threat, their muscles tensing, ready to act on instinct, not orders. Aaron whispered again, this time louder, "We'll get you out. I promise." The larger dragon's gaze locked on his, eyes searching for deceit, for threat. Aaron met that gaze, unflinching, letting courage and intent shine through every line of his face. Something unspoken passed between them, a fragile understanding. He would risk everything for these creatures. They would risk everything to survive. Wind tore across the plain, carrying shards of ice that sliced at exposed skin. Aaron worked faster, rerouting circuits, bypassing energy pulses, recalibrating the manipulator. Every success brought a brief surge of hope. Every spark of failure threatened despair. He could feel the storm closing in, pressure building from both nature and the unseen watchers of the research complex. One mistake, 1 second of hesitation, and all would be lost. And then it happened. A flicker in the manipulator, a sudden surge in the chains. The dragons shivered violently, their massive heads jerking as if responding to some instinctual signal. Aaron's breath caught. This was the moment. The moment where courage, skill, and instinct converged. If he failed now, the dragons would die. If he succeeded, freedom might begin. A distant rumble echoed through the cliffs, masking the hiss of the chains. Aaron's eyes darted toward the source. Something was moving in the snow, something large, deliberate, and aware. The storm itself seemed alive, and a shadow shifted closer, carrying a threat he had not anticipated. His pulse quickened. The dragon's fate hung by the thinnest of threads. Aaron's hand hovered over the manipulator. The choice was his. He could falter as most humans would. Or he could act. And for the first time he did not hesitate. The shadow moved closer, a dark silhouette against the white blur of the snowstorm. Aaron's breath came in ragged gasps, fog curling from his lips as he kept low beside the chained dragons. He could see the glint of metal, drones more than he had expected, and larger, faster, smarter. Their sensors cut through the blizzard like knives, scanning for heat signatures. One wrong move and they would target the dragons. Aaron's hands tightened on the energy manipulator. He had seconds, maybe less, to act. He pressed the device against the first chain, sending a precise pulse that bypassed the bioelectric lock. Sparks arced across the frost-laden metal, a hiss escaping the dragons' throats as electricity danced harmlessly along the links. One link weakened. One more and freedom could begin. The largest drone swooped in, rotors slicing the air, forcing snow into violent spirals. Its targeting sensors locked on the dragons. Aaron cursed under his breath. This was worse than he had imagined. He had planned for old patrol drones, slow and predictable, but these were new, sleek, agile, and ruthless. Their programming left no room for hesitation. Aaron's mind raced. He had to buy time. Not just for himself but for the dragons. He activated a small EMP burst, sending a shiver through the nearest drone. It jerked, sparks flying, engines screaming, before crashing into a ridge of ice with a metallic clang. The dragons shifted, muscles coiling, sensing the danger but unsure what he had done. Their trust was fragile, yet growing. The storm worsened, wind shrieking through the icy plains, driving snow into their faces. Visibility dropped to near zero. Aaron's heart pounded. He glanced at the dragons, each massive, wounded, breathing hard, and knew that their survival depended on both courage and speed. Hesitation could kill them all. He moved to the second chain, rerouting circuits with rapid precision. Sweat froze on his brow and his fingers stung from the cold, but he worked like a machine, calculating every voltage spike, every resonance. The smaller dragon groaned as its chains strained against the manipulation, golden eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. For the first time in decades, the dragons were no longer just victims. They were partners in a dangerous dance of survival. A drone reactivated nearby, engines whirring, sensors scanning. Aaron ducked behind a jagged ice ridge, but he couldn't hide forever. He whispered almost to himself, "Come on. Just a little more." His voice carried across the storm, fragile but steady. The dragons flinched at the sound, but they did not retreat. He had to make them understand that he was not their enemy. Another pulse from the manipulator. The second chain began to hum, energy flowing back into the dragon's own bioelectric fields, weakening the locks. Sparks flared along the frost-coated links. One chain trembled. Another followed. The dragon's eyes locked on Aaron, almost as if they understood he was guiding them. Trust and instinct intertwined. The largest drone swooped again, closer this time, its targeting laser sweeping the snow. Aaron made a split-second decision. He pressed a final pulse into the chain and triggered a remote override in the drone's system. It twitched violently, rotor sparks scattering, before toppling backward into a snowdrift. The storm swallowed it immediately. For a moment there was silence. Snow fell in heavy sheets, muffling sound. The dragons shifted, muscles coiling, eyes burning with a raw, untrained energy. Their bodies were scarred and weak, but their spirit flared like molten fire beneath ice. Aaron's pulse raced, not from fear but exhilaration. He was defying impossible odds. Alone, against technology and nature, he was winning. A rumble shook the plain. The wind carried a metallic howl, a signal that the remaining drones were regrouping. Aaron's eyes darted around, calculating escape routes, calculating timing, calculating trust. He could not outrun the storm or the drones, but maybe he didn't have to. The dragons could fly if freed. He just had to survive long enough to let them test their strength. "Almost there," he muttered. His fingers danced across the manipulator's controls, rerouting pulses to the final link. The frost-covered metal shimmered under the energy feedback, cracking faintly. The smaller dragon flexed its wings, testing what strength remained. Its golden eyes never left Aaron, a silent question shimmering in the depths of its gaze. Can we trust him? Another drone approached, faster this time, and a thin stream of snow whipped into Aaron's face. His teeth clenched. There was no time for hesitation, no margin for error. Courage, intelligence, and sheer determination pushed him forward. His fingers pressed the final sequence. Sparks flared brighter than ever, arcs of energy illuminating the storm in jagged flashes. The chain vibrated, bent, and then snapped with a deafening crack. The dragon roared, a sound of pain and liberation entwined. Ice shards flew from its scales, torn from the cold, and the storm seemed to pause in awe. Aaron felt a surge of triumph, but it was fleeting. The remaining drones were still active. The dragons, though freed from one chain, were not yet out of danger. He glanced at the dragons, scarred, battered, but alive, and realized that their flight would be a test of human ingenuity and courage. He had freed them partially, but the storm, the drones, and the harsh plains were still deadly. Survival depended on the next move, and the next move had to be bold, brilliant, and faster than anyone could imagine. Aaron clenched the manipulator, readying it for the next pulse. The dragons shifted under his hands, muscles coiling, wings stretching, sensing freedom but unsure how to claim it. The wind screamed around them, carrying both warning and promise. Aaron's mind raced, heart pounding, knowing the true challenge had just begun. Above the blizzard, a shadow moved faster, darker, and more dangerous than before. The next decision would decide not just the dragon's fate, but his own. One mistake now would end everything. One perfect move could change history. The wind tore at Aaron's face, biting through the layers of cloth and frost as he crouched beside the dragons. Their chains rattled, humming with unstable energy, each link threatening to snap, or worse, electrocute the dragons if handled incorrectly. He had freed the first chain, but the second and third were more complex, woven with experimental circuitry designed to kill the creatures if tampered with. No human had ever tried this before. Most wouldn't even imagine it. Aaron's teeth clenched. Most humans would have retreated long ago, fearing frostbite, drones, or the sheer scale of the dragons. He did not have that luxury. Courage wasn't about ignoring danger, it was about understanding it and finding a way through. And Aaron had spent his life learning to find impossible solutions. The smaller dragon shifted beside him, golden eyes glowing faintly in the storm. Its breath fogged the air and a low, cautious growl vibrated through the snow. Aaron whispered, "I won't let them hurt you again. I promise." He could see the skepticism in its gaze, the memory of human cruelty still raw, but there was also a flicker of hope. One small spark, and sometimes hope was enough to turn the tide. The chains were bioelectric in design, drawing power from the dragons themselves. Brute force would kill them instantly. Aaron adjusted the manipulator, running a delicate feedback calculation. If he could redirect the chain's energy back into the dragon's own nervous system in a controlled loop, the links could weaken without harming their bodies. It was risky. One wrong calculation and the overload would fry both dragons' hearts. His hands moved with precise urgency, rerouting voltage lines, creating microloops of energy flow. The storm made visibility almost zero, snow lashing at his eyes, frost forming on his gloves. Every second counted. He could hear the hum of the chains intensifying, a low warning that the system was unstable. Aaron ignored the fear in his chest. He focused. He had a plan and he trusted it. Above the ridge, the drones regrouped, their sensors cutting through the blizzard. The larger drone hovered, rotors spinning in a mechanical whine, scanning for heat signatures. Aaron knew he had only moments before it would strike again. The dragons could not fly yet, their muscles were weak and the chains still bound them partially. He needed a distraction. A flash of ingenuity hit him. He activated a secondary pulse on the manipulator, small enough to overload only the drone's targeting system without harming the dragons. Sparks scattered as the drone twitched, momentarily blinded. Aaron's heart hammered, adrenaline surging. The smaller dragon stiffened, sensing the electromagnetic interference. The larger dragon let out a low roar, its wings twitching. Instinct and courage were beginning to align. He moved to the next chain. Frost formed on his gloves as he manipulated the controls, guiding energy along precise pathways. The chains began to vibrate, and the dragons flinched instinctively. "Easy, easy," he murmured. Sweat froze on his brow, but he pressed on, recalculating as the energy levels shifted. He had to anticipate every feedback pulse, every surge. One error and decades of captivity would end in death. The largest drone swooped in from the side, faster than expected, rotors slicing through the storm. Its targeting laser swept across the dragons. Aaron froze for a heartbeat, then acted. He triggered a redirection pulse, sending the drone's sensors haywire. It veered off course, crashing into a jagged ice outcrop. Sparks flew, smoke curling into the blizzard. The dragons stirred, muscles tensing, eyes narrowing as they sensed a temporary advantage. Aaron's pulse raced as he returned to the chain. He whispered again, softer this time, feeling the storm press in from all sides. Almost there, just a little more. The chains shimmered under the combined stress of energy manipulation and dragon bioelectric feedback. Each pulse was precise, delicate, a conversation between human intelligence and ancient, powerful creatures. The smaller dragon flexed its wings, testing strength it had not felt in years. The larger one lifted its head, golden eyes blazing, sensing freedom on the edge of the storm. Aaron's manipulator crackled, sparks jumping, circuits bending under the strain. His hands were numb, but his mind burned with clarity. He calculated the final feedback loop in seconds, routing the chain's energy in a perfect circle. With a hiss and a flash, the chain vibrated violently, glowing blue and then snapping. The sound reverberated through the snow, a crack like thunder, and the larger dragon roared, a sound of pain, relief, and awakening. The smaller dragon followed, wings flaring instinctively, scales shimmering against the white storm. Their movements were hesitant, untrained, but alive, and that life was now their own. Aaron collapsed backward on the snow, chest heaving, frost covering his gloves and face. He had done it, partially. One dragon was free, the other still bound but weakened. He allowed himself a moment to feel pride, relief, and exhaustion. But there was no time to celebrate. The drones were regrouping, faster now, more aware. Their reinforcements would arrive soon. The dragons shifted beneath him, muscles coiling, wings stretching. Their trust in him was tenuous, fragile, but growing. Aaron looked up at the storm, wind howling and snow blinding, and knew the next step would be the hardest. The chains could not all fall at once. He would have to guide them, fight beside them, and outthink enemies that were faster, smarter, and more deadly than any human had faced before. Above the blizzard, a dark shape moved. More drones. Sleeker. Faster. More lethal. Aaron gritted his teeth. Every instinct screamed danger, but he also knew that human courage and ingenuity were not just tools, they were weapons. And he would use them all to save the dragons. The storm pressed in, cold and merciless. Sparks from the chains still danced in the air. Aaron stood, manipulator in hand, eyes blazing with determination. He took a deep breath and whispered, "We finish this, together." And for the first time the dragons responded, rumbling in agreement, muscles tensing, ready to test their wings. Freedom was close, but the final chains, and the deadliest obstacles, still lay ahead. The storm tore across the frozen plains like a living predator, snow swirling in blinding sheets, wind whipping against Aaron's face and freezing the breath in his lungs. The dragons flexed beneath him, muscles trembling from long captivity, wings folding and unfolding with cautious power. One was partially free, the other still chained but weakening under Aaron's guidance. The drones were regrouping, faster, smarter, relentless. Time was vanishing like sand through fingers. Aaron climbed onto the larger dragon's spiked ridge, gripping frost-covered scales with hands raw and numb. He whispered, "We move now. Fly or fall together." The dragon's golden eyes locked onto his, searching for intent. Aaron had risked everything, broken the first chains, outsmarted deadly machines, and now the final step loomed. Flight into the storm with death threatening from every direction. Courage alone would not be enough. He would need instinct, calculation, and trust in creatures most humans considered monsters. The smaller dragon flinched, testing its wings, its roar cutting through the howl of the blizzard. Its eyes flicked toward Aaron, and for a heartbeat, he imagined it judging him. Then, slowly, wings lifted, lifting a mass of ice-laden muscle from the snow. Aaron balanced, adjusting his stance as they rose, feeling the raw power beneath him. The sudden surge of wind, the tremor of ancient muscle, the vibration of life that had been suppressed for decades. Above, the drones swept in, their metallic rotors cutting through the storm with lethal precision. Missiles streaked toward the dragons, guided by sensors faster than the human eye could track. Aaron's mind raced, calculations firing at a speed that left his fingers trembling. He adjusted his balance, shifted his weight, and tapped a sequence into the manipulator strapped to his arm. Electromagnetic pulses flared along the dragon's scales, sending interference into the drone's targeting systems. The lead drone wobbled, its engines screaming before crashing into a ridge of ice. The dragons dodged instinctively, their movements untrained yet guided by raw survival instincts and newfound freedom. Aaron shouted commands, not to the creatures but to the storm itself, to the chaos around him, imagining that every pulse, every shift in weight, every angle of flight mattered. The smaller dragon stumbled once, its wings faltering, and Aaron leaned into it, pressing a hand to its side, whispering, "Hold on. You can do this. You're meant to fly." Snow whipped against them, stinging like needles, the cold searing through gloves, jacket, every layer. Yet the dragons rose higher, wings cutting arcs of power through the blizzard, muscles flexing, chains rattling and snapping as they struggled. The partially bound dragon was slower, weaker, but Aaron's guidance was precise, his mind anticipating every limitation, every falter. The storm was relentless, but so was human ingenuity. A missile streaked past, missing by inches. Another drone swooped in from behind, faster than any predator he had ever seen. Aaron reacted instantly, sending a pulse through the manipulator to overload the drone's sensors. Sparks flew. Engines screamed. The machine spiraled downward, smoke trailing in the icy wind. The dragons roared, feeling the temporary advantage, wings pumping harder, rising above the snow, above fear, above what most humans would have considered possible. Aaron's heart pounded, not from fear but from exhilaration. He had never felt so alive. The impossible had been forced into possibility by courage, calculation, and sheer refusal to bow to fate. He glanced down at the snow-covered plains below, the ruined research station disappearing into the blizzard. Every step, every pulse, every calculation had led to this moment. Flight, freedom, and survival against all odds. The partially freed dragon flinched, chains rattling dangerously, one link threatening to snap. Aaron's hand shot out, guiding its movements, rerouting a minor energy pulse from the manipulator to stabilize the lock. Sparks danced along the metal, illuminating the storm for a heartbeat. The dragon shuddered, flexed, then lifted fully, unbound enough to match its companion. Together they soared, a mass of fire and frost, power and instinct, shaking the storm around them. The remaining drones regrouped, but Aaron had anticipated every angle. With calculated pulses, he sent one spiraling into a snowdrift, another crashing into an ice cliff. The dragons twisted, rolled, and surged forward, instinct and strategy blending seamlessly. Human courage had given them more than life. It had given them the chance to reclaim their freedom. Hours, or maybe minutes, felt like lifetimes as they cut through the storm. Fatigue pressed against Aaron's limbs, frostbite nipping at fingertips and toes, but he refused to yield. Below, the frozen plains stretched endlessly, white and blinding, yet above, a faint golden glow broke through the clouds. Dawn. A new day. A new chance. Aaron's eyes met the dragon's once more. Trust had been earned, fear had been conquered, chains had been broken. They were alive because he had refused to follow the rules, refused to bow to authority, refused to accept impossibility. Humanity had shined, not through dominance, but through courage, ingenuity, and relentless determination. The storm began to wane, snow settling into silent drifts, the wind stilling enough to hear the dragon's heavy breathing. They rose above the ruins of Valdros, golden eyes scanning the horizon. Aaron held on, a smile cracking across his frost-covered face. The drones were disabled, the chains broken, but the true test of survival was only beginning. He knew the dragons could fly faster, farther than any human could imagine, yet he also knew they were still learning. Their freedom depended on trust, on guidance, on the courage of one human who refused to give up when everything seemed impossible. And as the sun's first rays pierced the clouds, glinting off scales and ice alike, Aaron realized, they had not just survived. They had reclaimed what humanity had almost destroyed. They were free, but the future, both human and dragon, was still unwritten. The storm had been survived, the drones defeated, but beyond the horizon lay new challenges, new enemies, and the question of what it truly meant to coexist with beings humans had once feared and enslaved. Aaron clenched his fists, adrenaline still surging. He had proven that courage and intelligence could bend reality, and that humans, when they dared, could accomplish the impossible. And for the dragons, for the first time in decades, the sky was theirs. The storm had passed. Dawn stretched across the plains of Valdros, painting the snow in soft gold and amber. Aaron leaned against the ridge of the largest dragon, chest heaving, frost still crusting his hair and clothes. The wind had softened to a whisper, carrying the distant echoes of metal crashing, the last drones disabled, and the trembling roar of dragons tasting freedom for the first time in decades. The two dragons hovered in the pale sunlight, massive wings folding and unfolding as they adjusted to the new reality. The smaller dragon stretched its wings, testing strength it had not known it still possessed. The larger one dipped its head, golden eyes meeting Aaron's with an intensity that made him shiver, not from cold but from understanding. They remembered cruelty, chains, and captivity. But they also remembered hope, courage, and trust. And now they had him. Aaron let out a long breath, the kind that carries exhaustion, relief, and triumph all at once. His hands shook from frostbite and adrenaline, but his mind was alive, alight with the knowledge that what he had done was more than survival. It was a declaration. Humanity could destroy, yes, but humanity could also protect, inspire, and save, even when the odds were impossibly stacked against them. He remembered the first steps toward the dragons, the fear, the skepticism, the calculated pulses of his manipulator. Every choice had mattered. Every pulse, every move had brought them to this moment. He had faced drones faster than any human thought possible, navigated a storm that seemed alive, and manipulated technology designed to kill the dragons. And yet, here they were, alive, breathing, wings strong, eyes bright, ready to reclaim a sky that had been stolen from them. The smaller dragon nudged him with its snout, warm breath against his frost-chapped face. A gesture, small but significant, acknowledging trust, acknowledging partnership. Aaron smiled, fatigue giving way to a deep, resonant joy. The dragons were no longer prisoners, they were allies, equals, and survivors of a world that had forgotten what courage looked like. But the victory was not without weight. The plains of Valdros stretched endlessly, filled with ruins and reminders of human fear and ambition. The research station lay in shards behind them, the snow around it scorched by pulses and sparks. The drones were silent now, but the knowledge that humans had sought to control, to dominate, to destroy these creatures lingered like a shadow. Aaron knew the world beyond the horizon might not understand, might not forgive, might even seek to reclaim what had been lost. He turned his gaze to the dragons, now fully lifted into the morning sky. The larger dragon beat its wings with newfound confidence, arcs of frost and sunlight shimmering across its scales. The smaller dragon followed, learning, adapting, growing stronger with each beat. And Aaron, standing on its ridge, felt a surge of something ancient and vital, the knowledge that humans at their best could inspire change, could bend fate, could create miracles. A distant rumble echoed across the plains, the first sound of the wind carrying over open ice fields. But it was no longer a threat, it was a reminder. A reminder that the future was still unwritten, that courage, intelligence, and morality were tools as powerful as any weapon. Aaron clenched his fists, the manipulator dangling from his wrist, snow melting against the heat of his determination. The dragons had been freed, yes, but their journey and his had only begun. Word would spread. Stories of a lone human defying drones, manipulating impossible locks, and standing in the storm to save creatures long thought extinct would reach every settlement. Some would call him reckless. Others would call him a hero. But Aaron did not care for titles. He had done what was right when no one else would. He had acted when the world hesitated. And in that act, humanity had shone brighter than it had in decades. The dragons circled above him, wings slicing arcs of power through the lightning snow. Their roars echoed across Valdros, a song of freedom and defiance, a sound no chains could contain. Aaron watched, awe striking him in waves, feeling the gravity of what had just occurred. Life had been saved. Freedom had been reclaimed. And the future, human and dragon alike, was a canvas waiting to be written with courage and hope. He imagined the skies, vast and open, filled with dragons no longer afraid, humans no longer complacent, worlds where the impossible could be achieved by those willing to risk everything. That vision surged through him, bright and unshakable. It was the heartbeat of humanity, clever, brave, relentless, willing to challenge fate itself. Aaron stepped back as the dragons hovered above him, wings beating slower now, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun reflected off their scales like molten gold. He knew they would survive not just because of their strength, but because of the courage he had shown, the risks he had taken, and the trust he had earned. For the first time in decades, the dragons were free. And for the first time in his life, Aaron felt the true weight of what a single human could achieve when determination, intellect, and courage aligned. The world could destroy, but humans could also protect, lead, and inspire. They could bend the impossible into reality. He whispered into the quiet plains, almost to himself, "This is just the beginning." And for the dragons, the sky was theirs. For humanity, the example had been set. Courage, ingenuity, and heart had triumphed against impossible odds. Valdros would remember this day not as a tale of fear or death, but as a testament to what humans could achieve. The dragon soared higher, wings cutting arcs of golden light against the dawn. Aaron followed, feeling the wind at his back, knowing that the chains were broken, the storm had passed, and the impossible had been made real. He had led when others would not. He had trusted when others doubted. And in doing so, humanity had shone brighter than any chain, any storm, any enemy. The horizon was endless, and for the first time both dragons and human looked forward, not to survival but to what they could achieve together.